What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about our favorite hobby, video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 58. 58 weeks in, going strong, and things are looking good. So hope you guys are all doing well out there. Hopefully you had an awesome weekend. I'm currently recording, Thursday night? It's actually really late. It's actually almost Friday morning technically. So I'm burning the midnight oil, as they say. And recording a little early. I probably would have recorded Friday because I was a little tired before I hopped on here. But the wife and I are heading out of town this weekend. A little getaway, a little mini getaway, which is, I think, much needed. A little time off work and little time without the kid because he's staying with grandma and grandpa, and it's gonna be nice. And I think we're gonna try to squeeze in. I'm gonna try to squeeze in some golf, which, as I've talked about many a times, I love golf, and so I think it's gonna be a good weekend. I'm looking forward to it, and so that should be a lot of fun. So we gotta get the pod. You can't miss a week, so we got to keep the podcast going. And I think we got an exciting show, some good topics to talk about this week. Outside of that, I mean, I hope you guys are enjoying March Madness. If you're into that, I was watching the Sweet 16 game between Gonzaga and UCLA, and boy, that was a damn good game. Like right up to the last minute, and then the dude hits this monstrous three from like almost half court. I mean, it was way beyond the 3-point line. Drains it, and then seconds later gets a steal to seal the game. Essentially, gets fouled, goes to the free throw line, drains 1 out of 2, but sealed the deal. So, well, I mean, what a game, man! Gonzaga looking pretty good. So it's exciting. Again, as I mentioned last week when we had Jordan on the show, my bracket has been totally and completely busted. I didn't even bother after the first like 2 days of games. I was like, nah, it's not even worth keeping up because I'm just so busted. I all the wrong picks, but it's been a wild March Madness and such a fun time of year, man. You got March Madness going on. MLB baseball is about to kick off, which is super exciting. Spring is in the air. It's just around the corner. Things are warming up here in the Pacific Northwest, even though it's a little rainy today, and I think tomorrow it'll be rainy as well, but it's okay. Things are looking good. So hope you guys are doing well out there, having some fun, enjoying spring, March Madness, all the good stuff. Now, one thing I wanted to say right up at top regarding some of the recent news, and we'll touch on a couple of these little news bits as they fit into a couple of topics we're going to talk about. But, of course, Xbox, Activision, the hearings, this constant battle between PlayStation, Xbox. I kind of want to just say this because I don't know what it is on the Twitter algorithm, but it's feeding me some interesting folks with some interesting takes. And I think this whole situation with this deal going through the hearings, this regulatory process, and quite frankly, this battle between these two mega corporations really just they fighting gloves off. And in a lot of ways, kind of just trying to make each other look good, which is kind of funny to watch. And there's been some entertaining moments come out of it, but I think it's really shown like the true colors of some of these influencers or some of these people online and in social media, because you see these people like, look, I'll be the first to admit that this entire topic is good for business. Like a lot of content creators are hitting this shit hard because it gets the clicks. And a lot of these same people do so in a way to instigate the other side. So like an Xbox fan will intentionally make everything about Xbox look so good and put PlayStation down in every single way instead of looking at things in an unbiased kind of lens as a like some sort of reporter or actual journalist would do. I'm not saying that these folks are actual journalists, but you know, a lot of these influencers just take take the one side and really kind of gaslight it. There's so much gaslighting going on. It's not even funny. And a lot of them are just doing it for clicks. That's really what it comes down to. And I think it's really shown some of the true colors of these folks, their true intentions. And like, I could just beat the drum too. I could hop in. You know, I've made known my biases, right? I prefer PlayStation, but I'm no stranger to Xbox. I've been an Xbox fan historically for a long time. But I mean, I love PlayStation. They tend to put out the games that I enjoy more as compared to Xbox. So that's my preferred console. But I could totally hop on that bandwagon and just shit on everything that Xbox does and says, all for the hate clicks, right? And try to kind of ride this wave. But at the same time, like, I feel like it's just fake. It's just so fake. It's faux, and it's not me. Like, that's not my character. I don't want to do that. I don't want to grow that way and just be that person. That's not who I want to be. So it's amazing to me, the sheer amount of gaslighting and propaganda. I mean, there's people that are putting out and spinning information in ridiculous and crazy ways. And I think part of that is a reflection of our current culture, at least here in America, in regards to news and reporting, because it's all reported and everything is spun to make one side look better than the other. Regardless of what your side is, that's how things are reported on, is with clear bias and leniency, rather than kind of laying out the facts and letting users decide for themselves. We see that all the time, like with mainstream news organizations when it comes to like politics and government and stuff like that, like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all that stuff. It's all propagandized, and it's pretty crazy. It's really, really crazy out there. And it's kind of, it's getting really old. I gotta say, it's getting very, very old. But just want to say, I mean, of course, we'll jump into where I think the topics are most interesting. And again, there's a couple little snippets that have recently come out that tie into a couple topics we'll touch on today, that I think are interesting. So we'll touch on them, but I'm not going to hop on this hate bandwagon, or this gaslighting of the console wars, just to try to get clicks and people to listen to the show and stuff like that. It's not me. It's not who I am, and I'm good. I'm good without it. So just wanted to throw that out there, because it's been insane what some people are doing and saying, and I don't know. I find it just crazy. So that aside, got that off my chest. I'm going to take a sip of my beverage here, and just so you guys know, drink of the week here is Pinot Grigio. I found some Pinot in the fridge, and I was like, that kind of sounds good. I was going to go for a beer, but I was like, with it being so late, I was like, I don't really want something super bubbly. So we went with a Pinot Grigio. I'm not a big fan of this, I'm going to be honest with you, but it's okay. Just okay. So, as I mentioned, this is a video games podcast, and I know there's quite a few of you that are new. So thank you. Welcome to the show. The best way you can support the show is to leave us nice reviews. Leave us nice reviews on the podcast platform you're listening at, Apple, Spotify, those ones. You can also find video episodes over on YouTube and Rumble, if you want to check those out. I'm also got a Facebook page. You can go like that, or you can find me on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. And I've got a clips channel. It's Gamecite Chronicles Clips on YouTube. So you can check that out, where I just kind of do various clips in both the short format as well as kind of longer formats that go up, and it's going great. I mean, the videos seem to be getting some good traction over there. Some of you have subscribed over there, which is awesome, and I really do appreciate that. So thank you guys for that. It's going very well. There's been a lot of kind of back and forth in the comments and some of those. which is awesome to see. So that's great. So if you're inclined, just or want some kind of short form content on some of the major topics, head over to Gamesite Chronicles clips. Drop a sub and the like. And lastly, you can catch new episodes of the show each and every week, Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Taking another sip of my beverage there. Now, as I mentioned, I think we got a lot of good things to talk about this week. And the main thing I wanted to dive into this week is game development costs. There's been a couple of news stories that have kind of surfaced up on some of recent games and their budgets. And I kind of feel like this is a sign of a big problem within the industry. So I kind of want to dive into that, share some examples, and share my thoughts on maybe a potential, I guess, resolution or solution to this problem. Also, two other news items I do want to cover in depth. First is Redfall seems to be potentially ditching its online requirement for single player, which is exciting. And Spider-Man 2, what will probably be huge PS5 game coming out later this year, had a release window leaked. So we'll touch on that. But before we get into any of that, we have to talk about the games that we're playing. And as always, I want to hear from you guys. What games have you been playing? Let me know either on Twitter or down in the comments below. For me, a couple games. So as I mentioned last week, I've been playing Hi-Fi Rush. I beat that game. It took me, I want to say, around 14 hours or so. And I know it could have kept playing because I guess there's like a secret ending. There's some additional things you can do after you beat the game. Some additional like challenges and stuff like that. And gives you like the secret ending. And I thought about doing that, but I kind of wanted to move on. So maybe I'll come back to it at some point. But I did beat it, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed this game. And it's interesting because it's one of those games where like I started it out and I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm really feeling this. Like it's cool, but it just wasn't really sticking with me. And then I want to say about 4 hours or so in, about a third, it started to click with me a little bit. And then I feel like the deeper I got into the game, the more I fell in love with it. And I gotta say, man, Tango Gameworks has done it again for me. Because if you recall last year, if you're a longtime listener to the show, I was very skeptical about Ghostwire Tokyo when that came to the PlayStation 5. I heard some interesting things about it, so I decided to pick it up, got it on sale, jumped into it, and fell in love with that game. It was one of my favorite games that I played last year. It was so much fun. And it's a really good game, I think, a really underrated game. And if you're over on Xbox, I think it's coming to Xbox, Ghostwire Tokyo. So I would highly recommend it. I think it's coming in April, a couple weeks. So check it out for sure. You don't want to miss that one. But similar to my experience with Ghostwire Tokyo, like I kind of went in. I know there was a lot of buzz around this game. A lot of people saying, "Oh, this is a Game of the Year contender." It's Xbox has got a big hit on their hands and all this stuff. I was like, okay. I was like, whoa, calm down. Like, let me check this game out. And finally, I jumped into it, and I don't know. I think it's great. I think it's a great game. Now, do I think it's a Game of the Year contender? No, I not for me at least. I think it's a great game, and I really enjoyed my time with it. But I wouldn't say it's like Game of the Year material. But that's just my opinion. One of the things that's great about this game, and I touched on a little bit last week, but its style, its art direction is incredible. And one of the things it does so beautifully is the way it goes from like 2D animation, it's like a cartoon you're watching, seamlessly to like a 3D rendered world in the same art style. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's got a lot of charm to the game between the characters, the dialogue. It's awesome. And there were certain sections as I was playing through the levels where I was getting like Persona 5 vibes. In the sense, like when you're navigating through dungeons, like you're kind of just running, your character's running around, you're collecting some stuff. And then obviously it's turn-based battles that you go into, but in this case, there are battle segments. And throughout that, your team, your party members are talking to you. It pops up in a very similar way, and just the stylishness of it, the way the characters would interact. I just got a lot of Persona 5 vibes, and which is a great thing, I think. And so I thought that was a nice plus for it. And the combat, because this is a rhythm-based game, and once you get it kind of click in a little bit, the combat really starts to shine once you get into a flow. And that's where I think I had the most fun with this game, because you start to figure out like good combos to use. You can call in kind of your teammates to do special attacks for you, and you start to unlock different special moves. And once you kind of get into this flow, like you're feeling the beat, you're nailing all of your attacks on the beat, using different specials, dodging when you need to, parrying when you need to. And it's just it's fun. Like you get into that flow and you're shooting for that like A or S rating. It's great. Like that's when the game really, really shines. I do, as I mentioned before, I think the writing is really, really fun. I thought the dialogue works well with the aesthetic of the game. One of the things, because this game was obviously compared to Forspoken that came out around the same time, PlayStation versus Xbox type of thing. And yes, there are, I guess, similar potentially cringy moments in Hi-Fi Rush, at least from the trailer. When they first showed off the game, I was like, oh, that dialogue is kind of a little bit cringe. The game, but it works with this game. It works with the aesthetic, and the way you see the characters kind of grow throughout this adventure. It has a little bit more maturity to it, as opposed to what I've seen in Forspoken, if I'm being quite candid. So I think it works, especially with the art style. A couple things though, I think they could improve on if they do a sequel, or at least that I wasn't really a big fan of, is that there's sections of the game where you have to do parrying, and you have to like time your parries perfectly to the section. Otherwise you can't progress. And those sections I found really frustrating, because again, you're getting into this flow state, you're taking down enemies, and all of a sudden you have to do this parry section. Kind of just takes you out of it if you can't nail it. And look, I'm not going to say I'm really good at these types of games, but I'm not music illiterate. Like here's a little fun fact about me. I studied music in high school, and actually studied music in college. I minored in it. And so I played drums in high school. I used to play in a band, and I would say I'm pretty musically inclined. And it's something I've actually always wanted to get back to. So I can hold a beat, but I was struggling in certain sections, especially the parrying ones, to kind of nail the beat. And I don't know if it was like input lag or what, but it got a little frustrating. And again, I know that part of that's on me, so, and I understand that, but I just feel like those sections, the game would be better with either less of those or something else entirely. Like there are also sections of the game like where you go to like a 2D mode, so from 3D to 2D sections, or kind of these on rail sections where you have to do various tacks and dodges that are timed. More of those would be awesome instead of some of these pairing sections, because it keeps you in the flow of all that stuff. The other thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way is I feel like the music could have been a little more emphasized. Now, the second to last boss was the best, because that not only was the music really, really good and had a good beat to it, you could really hear it, and it just fit in well with that entire boss battle. And all the boss battles are actually pretty dope in the game. But there are other earlier levels where just like, I don't know, the music's fine. It's not bad by any means, but I wanted a little bit more synchronous, if that's even the right way to say it, but between kind of what you're doing and a good beat to do it to. So I feel like they could emphasize that a little bit more. But again, overall, I think the game is awesome. I would definitely recommend it. It exceeded my expectations, I have to say. And again, it was kind of the deeper I got into it, the more I liked it. So yeah, man, Hi-Fi Rush, a great game. I don't think it's a game of the year contender, but I definitely could see this game winning like best art direction, something like that. Maybe even best musical score or something like that. But definitely winning something, walking home away. We talk about the Game Awards and some of these other awards. Definitely can see it walking home with something for sure. I think Xbox. I mean, man, if Xbox didn't acquire Bethesda and all their studios, I don't even know what they would have, if I'm being quite honest, because Bethesda has consistently delivered, I think, for Xbox. So there's that. After that, I decided to jump into Metroid Prime Remastered on the Switch, and I've just played a little bit. I want to say I've played 2.5 hours, maybe. So I've just started to dabble in it. This game is super nostalgic for me. Like, I have not played it since I want to say 2002 when it came out on the GameCube. Like, I remember it pretty vividly to where that Christmas got my GameCube. I got Super Mario Sunshine. I think I got Zelda Wind Waker and then Metroid Prime. And I just remember that Christmas break. Like, I remember spending all day playing this and Zelda, like just being totally engrossed in this game. And I loved it. Like, it was so awesome. And playing it now, like, there are certain sections that I remember, some of the mechanics I remember, and it's just like a trip down memory lane. So nostalgic for me. It's pretty cool. I gotta say, it's a beautiful remake. Like, I started out playing it on the handheld, and I don't have the OLED Switch by any means, but just the handheld here. And actually, side note, I just added the Zelda Skyward Sword Joy-Cons to my Switch. I bought them a while ago, but I finally opened them and used them, and God, they're so good looking. Look at that. But I was playing it handheld mode, and it looks really, really good. I think the remaster is really well done thus far. Beautiful looking game. It's interesting, even on kind of older Switch hardware, it runs well, looks great. So I think they've done well, and I also think it's been adapted pretty well for modern controls. I know the GameCube controller, it wasn't like dual analogs like you would have with the first person shooter or like first person game. And then I know when they did the Wii port, you were using motion with the stick and then the Wiimote on the other hand. And so this feels a little bit more modernized, which is nice. I really, really like that. So I think they adapted the controls really well. And I want to get all the way through it. I don't know if I will, but plan on playing it a little bit this weekend, which is really exciting. So it's just it's been fun to jump into that game. And so far I like it. It's pretty cool. Now, Resident Evil 4 comes out tomorrow at the time of this recording, which I'll be picking that up, jumping into that game. I'm super looking forward to that. Again, I've never played Resident Evil 4 all these years. I've just never gotten around to it. So this will be my first foray into that, which is really, really exciting because I've heard it's the best. And it seems like this remake, with all the review scores going out there, is pretty damn good, which surely shouldn't be that surprising. Capcom has just been absolutely nailing it with like every game that they released lately. So that's exciting. And then also, Billy, by the time you hear this, it'll be over. But this weekend upcoming for me, again, at the time of this recording, is Diablo 4. They're doing an open beta, and I kind of want to jump into it. So I'm hoping when I get back from our trip on Sunday that maybe I could spend a couple hours um, in Diablo 4 because that game looks so good. I've heard a lot of good things about it. It looks really, really good, and I'm excited for it. So I kind of want to jump into it. I've never been like Diablo 3 was my first foray into it. I really enjoyed my time with Diablo 3. I'm not one who's going to do a lot of the end game stuff, but I enjoyed the campaign. Love, the loot, all that stuff. So I'm looking forward to this one quite a bit, I have to say. So that's what's up next for me. I didn't really get to play too much this week, I really feel like, but we're knocking some games out nonetheless. All right. Let's jump into a couple of those news stories. Those two news stories I mentioned. First is Redfall and them potentially ditching online requirements. So this past week, a lot of content creators, influencers, media types, all that stuff got to go to a preview event for the upcoming game from Arcane Studios. And the preview coverage went out. I didn't read any of that stuff. I'm sold on this game, right? I've talked about that before. I'm very much looking forward to this game, way more than Starfield, if I'm being honest. And outside of the preview coverage, we've got a couple interesting tidbits since some outlets interviewed the game's director. One of which, as it was reported by Video Games Chronicle and others, they picked it up, but they said that Arcane is, quote, looking into removing the game's always online single player component. So the game's director, let's see, what's his name? Harvey Smith. He said, quote, there are two ways developers could react to that. And he's referring to the online requirement. They could say, oh my God, you're always online. If you get on your Steam and it's not online, you freak out. If you get on your Xbox and can't get the latest patch or see what your friends are doing, you freak out. You want to always be online. But that response, I think, lacks empathy. There are people who live in places where there are outages, or their broadband is shitty, or they're competing with family members because their mom's streaming a movie or their brother's on another device. And so I think it's a legitimate critique. Ellipsis. We do take a lot of empathy. We listen, and we have already started to work to address this in the future. We have to do some things like encrypt your save games and do a bunch of UI work to support it. And so we're looking into, I'm not supposed to promise anything, but we're looking into and working actively toward fixing it in the future. So he's referring to the online requirement functionality. And if you recall, I think it was a month or so, a couple weeks back, in the FAQ, they said a persistent online connection is required for single player and co-op. And this kind of had some caused a little bit of a controversy, a little bit of consternation with that. And I think rightfully so. I think, for games that aren't, multiplayer centric or live service centric and offers some sort of single player experience, you should be able to play that offline, I think. Now, granted, most of us are always online anyways, right? So in reality, this is really not that big of a problem, but I think you should have the option to do so, because I like the way he puts it in kind of having that empathetic approach that, you know what, excuse me, maybe there are times where you're not going to have an internet connection or you don't have a stable connection and you still want to be able to play and experience the game. I think that's absolutely right. I think that's a wonderful way of putting it. Empathy is such a like a underrated character trait that not a lot of people use, I feel like, these days. So it's a breath of fresh air in that regard. And so I think this is good. Now, if they actually come through with it and what that timeline looks like, who knows? Hopefully, I would say by release, or at least, maybe within like a week or two from launch. That'd be nice. Just to give people the option. So I like that. I think it's good press in that regard. Now, another thing that has kind of come out from interviews with this gentleman is that there's been reports that Arcane originally had a PlayStation 5 version of Redfall in development. So also relayed by VGC, Arcane Austin studio director, again, Harvey Smith, that's his name, confirmed that plans for a PlayStation release of the game was canceled after the Microsoft acquisition. God, I can't talk. And he says, quote, we were acquired by Microsoft and it was a change with a capital C. They came in and they said, no PlayStation 5, we're focusing on Xbox, PC, and Game Pass. And he went on to say, it's not very serious. It's even a good decision, I think, referring to dropping the PlayStation 5 version. It helps to support Game Pass and have one less platform to worry about and one less complexity. Ellipsis. Game Pass has a ton of players that could become our biggest game thanks to 30 million. Well, I can't remember the exact number of subscribers. End quote. So a couple of things. I a couple of things I take away from this. First is I don't think this is at all surprising. This game has been in development before Xbox came in and acquired Bethesda. So it would logic dictates that there would be a PlayStation 5 version because originally this game would have been multi-platform. I don't think that's a stretch. I don't think that's really surprising at all. And then for Xbox to acquire them, and since this is a new IP, say no, this is going to be on Xbox only platforms. Again, I don't think that's at all surprising. And I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot of folks who have been gaslighting the shit out of this for the sake of console wars. You've got some people say, look, Xbox is taking away games from PlayStation. And then on the other side, you've got Xbox saying, no, it was never confirmed for PlayStation. It's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Like it's like, look, regardless of what you feel, there was a PlayStation 5 version. Now there's not. It was taken away in quotes. Like there's not going to be a version for the PlayStation 5. So you're both right. You're both right. It's so stupid. It's like the definition of gaslighting, the way this is being used and propagated to just for clicks, hates in console war points, all that stuff. You even have folks pointing out that Phil Spencer had going back to like interviews of Phil Spencer talking about him saying we're not taking away PlayStation games that they already have on their calling a liar and stuff like that. And again, you do have to listen to Phil Spencer in the way he's not stupid. He carefully chooses his words. But let's be real here. Like, look, the dude talks out of both sides of his mouth, right? Like it's all corporate speak with Phil Spencer. It's all well thought out. It's planned. The dude's media trained to a T. And you kind of always have to take with what he says with a grain of salt. I don't like, you can't take this man for his word per se. Like you kind of got to read between the lines sometimes with this stuff. And so I don't get it. I just think, again, the gaslighting is just way too much. And like, it sucks. I mean, if you're a big PlayStation, like I would much rather play Redfall on PlayStation 5 for sure, especially when you talk about like the DualSense and some of the features that would have, especially with the shooter, like that'd be dope, but that's just not a reality that we have. And, this is why Xbox is buying up everything so they can take all these IPs, take all these games and have them exclusive to their service. That's the game that they're playing. And it's like, it's just semantics at this point, and it's kind of stupid. Now, the other thing that I think is really interesting that I've not heard anyone talk about is, did you catch that he said Game Pass has 30 million subs? Anybody catch that? Anybody? Hello? Because I did. And if I'm pretty in tune with, I would say I'm pretty in tune with the news, and I don't think Xbox has announced any numbers for Game Pass this year. And I think the most recent numbers were around 25, 27 million, if I'm not mistaken. And so that would mean in 2023, they've seen a couple million growth if they're at 30 million subs. And I know he says, like, I don't know the exact number, but you got to imagine he knows a ballpark number and isn't just spitting out random numbers. So I found that really, really interesting. And I think what will be interesting to see is, will there be, as these big exclusives hit the service, like a Redfall and most definitely Starfield later down this year, do they see a significant growth with the launches of these games? Because if they do, then I would chalk that up as a success for those particular games in Game Pass and Xbox ultimately. But if they don't, then I think you kind of have to start to ask the question, like, have they maxed out? Have they reached, their full potential? I don't think that's the case, but you'd have to imagine that people are waiting for the big titles to hit before, kind of committing to the subscription service. So, and that's why they do it, right? You want to bring these big hits to the service to try to draw on the crowds and stuff like that. So very, very interesting that he kind of let that one slip out. But either way, man, I'm again, I avoided all preview coverage. I'm already sold on this game. I cannot wait to play it. I will probably be playing this all the way through, and kind of putting Zelda on the back burner for this game, if I'm being honest, just because I think this game looks absolutely awesome and I cannot wait to jump into it. So it's going to be dope. Now let's talk a little Spider-Man. The next news item I wanted to touch on. So with this one, we may have a release window. So the Venom voice actor from the game, Tony Todd is his name, he wrote on Twitter stating that the game is planned to release in September and will have a massive ad campaign planned for the month prior. He then later tweeted that he said, quote, "No more hints about Spider-Man 2. It was all a fever dream. Blame it on jet lag. Who knows? I might not even be Venom." And he did this with a picture of him literally underwater, symbolizing that he got in trouble and is underwater, probably with the legal team for his previous tweet talking about the release date for Spider-Man 2. Now, we don't actually know what the release date is. We haven't really seen anything of Spider-Man 2 except Insomniac has confirmed that indeed Spider-Man 2 will come in 2023. So this is, and the fact that he got in trouble and kind of followed it up with like, "I'm in trouble. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about," tells me that, yeah, he's probably right. He probably got in trouble, and this is likely accurate. And this is big news. This is huge. Now, if you recall, Spider-Man 1 released also in September in 2018. So kind of makes sense to use the same window for the sequel. I mean, Horizon did the same thing. I think they came out in February. I'm pretty sure it was February 2017, and then February in 2022. So kind of seems to be a trend there, albeit anecdotal, but makes sense. I think it's fitting. But I think what makes this more intriguing is it's going to go, if this is true, it's going head to head against Xbox's major title with Starfield, which is slated for September 6th of this year. And of course, this is adding fuel to the console war fire. People are gaslighting the shit out of it. There's lots of interesting takes on Twitter. And it's crazy. It's crazy. But there's actually one take I saw that I wanted to touch on. Let me pull it up here 1 second. And I'm seeing a lot of kind of takes like this. It just doesn't really make sense to me. So this person says, quote, "Starfield will be played much longer than Spider-Man will, be around longer, be talked about more in the future. But that's not Spider-Man's fault. It can be amazing itself. It's hard to compare the two, really." And he's referencing to Starfield going head to head with Spider-Man 2 because it's being released presumably around the same time. And first of all, I don't understand this obsession with game length. We'll touch on this a little bit more when we talk about game development costs and stuff like that. But it's like, I don't understand how people think that like the longer the game is, the better it is. Like that's just not accurate whatsoever. Some of the best games I've played aren't particularly long. I can think of actually one of my favorite games of all time, one of the most memorable games for sure was Journey. I played that on the PS3, I believe, is when I first played it. And that game, you can beat it in probably 2 hours, but it's such an emotional, amazing experience. And it was only 2 hours. Like, that game is awesome. It's amazing. It truly is amazing. And that game, I believe, won Game of the Year in 2012. So that tells you something. So I just don't understand like this obsession with game length when a lot of games are just bloated with meaningless content. Like, look, I get that some folks love to replay games and that they enjoy. And historically, a lot of the Bethesda RPGs like Elder Scrolls, Fallout, they're highly moddable, they're highly replayable, and people spend years investing in these games. And I think that's great. Have at it, dude. That's awesome. But to act like that makes Starfield a better game or superior to a game like Spider-Man, which is an open world kind of narrative story driven experience, I think is crazy. I'm not trying to say one is better than the other, but again, I think this comparison is just stupid when we talk about like game length and people are going to be replaying Starfield. You're going to spend so much time. Yeah, you're going to spend so much time visiting all 1,000 planets that are probably procedurally generated outside of a handful of them. And it's going to be just so wonderful. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but that's my take on Starfield's 1,000 planet bloat. That does not interest me. So I'll leave it at that. But I just don't like to use that as to take a shot at Spider-Man. I think it's stupid. And the person even admits like you can't compare the two, yet you are comparing the two. Like, come on. Like, look, Spider-Man 2 is going to be huge. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I think Spider-Man 1 on PS4 and the remaster on PS5, I think altogether has sold around 20 million copies. And then I know Miles Morales has sold around, I think, 10 to 12 million copies, because I want to say combined, they've sold about 30 plus million copies of those games. And so with Spider-Man 2, I would not be surprised if this game outsells God of War Ragnarok. Remember, God of War Ragnarok, I think in its first 3 months sold 11 million copies. I could see Spider-Man 2 outpacing that faster. And so on top of that, like on the Xbox side, I have no doubt that Starfield is going to be huge, especially in terms of player counts. I'm sure we're going to get lots of buzz around that, 30 million players or something like that, because that's the way Xbox seems to measure their games. And there's going to be a lot of buzz around this game. You're going to see a lot of influencers talk about it. You're going to see a lot of YouTube content around it. You're going to see everyone's going to be streaming it when it comes out. It's going to be huge. A lot of people are going to be talking about the game. It's going to be a massive marketing buzz around it, no doubt. But here's where the rubber meets the road. And that is, how much will each game actually make? I'm talking revenue. Because ultimately, that's what it comes down to, right? These are businesses. You got a product. You're trying to make money from said product. So you want to compare the two. Maybe that's the best way. How much will each game make? And we know Xbox doesn't care about game sales. Starfield is going to be given away for free on Game Pass. And I know they talk about player counts, and you see that from a lot of Xbox folks online, is you talk about, like X game had so many player counts, or Xbox had however many monthly active users. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting metric, but that doesn't tell me, that doesn't equal money. Like player count doesn't equal money. So, because you're giving your game away for free essentially. So how do you measure the return on investment on said game? Because that's I'm not seeing it there. And maybe I'm missing something. Let me know. I'm sure you will. But let me know, because I don't see it. Whereas you talk about like they're going to sell Spider-Man 2 at $70 a pop, you can easily calculate how much money that game is going to make based on how many copies get sold. And I think I feel like that's the ultimate litmus test. Now, presumably Starfield isn't a live service game, so they're not making necessarily money on the back end. Maybe they may make money with mods, maybe some DLC content down the road. But how do they recoup them? Like that game has to be very expensive to make. It's been in development for a long time. How do you recoup the cost of that? Or does Microsoft even care? I don't know. Maybe they don't. They have deep pockets. They don't need to make money with stuff on Game Pass. It's not huge for them, but I think it's an important metric to look at when we talk about games performance and the economics within the industry. The other thing I've been thinking about with Starfield is, because this is a flagship title for Xbox, so will there be a special edition console? Will there be a controller? I could definitely see them doing a controller. Xbox has been pretty good about that. Kudos. But will there be a collector's edition? Bethesda usually does big collector's editions with all their major hits or major releases, like Fallout, Elder Scrolls. and a lot of people buy it up. I mean, I'm one of them. So are they going to do that? I don't know. It's interesting because this game is meant for Game Pass, but could easily be a big seller. So I don't know how they balance it. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of balance it. But either way, back to Spider-Man 2. That's freaking exciting. And September is going to be insane if this is actually true. Hold on to your butts. Like, this isn't bad, but it's not great. Like, it's kind of dry. I don't know. I guess that's Pinot Grigio, right? I don't know. I'm not a big wine person, but just kind of sounded good tonight. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about game development. More specifically, the rising cost of game development. And I kind of wanted to jump into this because I've seen a couple articles pop up lately about some recent games and their underperformance and massive budgets. And I kind of think this is a huge issue within the industry. And maybe a little bit of a trend, if you will. Now, I've talked about kind of the rising cost of game development, but I kind of want to walk through a couple of those examples and kind of this contradictory sides that are kind of going against each other that I kind of see happening within the industry, and offer up a potential solution for the two. And I think this is important because it is about the economics of the industry. And I think we're reaching a point where it's unsustainable. So I think it's important to think about, I think it's important to talk about, and have some perspective on. So let's start with Forspoken. So let me get the article pulled up here, just so I have it for reference. So VG247 reported is about a week ago that Forspoken may have had a budget of over $100 million. They found this out because according to a LinkedIn page of a former member of Luminous Productions, they had pointed that out. Now, if you recall, this game was touted as one of the big AAA exclusives for PlayStation this year. We all know kind of the marketing cycle leading up to it, which was not that great. Came out to a lot of mixed reviews. I think a lot of people seem to like it, but then the Metacritic score was not so great. A lot of really takes all over the place with this game, but I think the consensus was that the writing was pretty bad. Now, later, Square Enix had come out and announced that the studio who made the game, Luminous Productions, was actually being merged and folded into the company by May 1st. And this comes after, unsurprisingly, Square also noted that sales of the game were disappointing. It's kind of a trend. I feel like every Square Enix game that comes out just underperforms whatever their expectations are. It just seems to be a consistent trend with Square Enix. I have no idea what's going on over there when it comes to their Western games, like Outriders, for example, or Avengers. Well, we all know how that went, but I digress. Just very, very interesting that they consistently have this problem. But it's to the point where Square, they came out and said it could impact their financial results and put them at considerable risk. And I put considerable risk in quotes there. So look, say what you will about this game. From what I played of the demo, it seems like far too large of a budget based on what I was kind of seeing. Again, I thought it ran well. I thought the combat was really interesting. I think the demo did a disservice to a certain degree. Like, I was interested in it, but I don't think the demo did the game as much, because I had heard it seemed like one of the, as I mentioned before, you kind of have to ease into the game, the mechanics, the combat, and kind of slowly ease your way into it, whereas the demo kind of just throws you into it. On top of that, they poorly marketed this game from the get-go. I mean, it wasn't up until fairly shortly before the game is actually released did we start to see actual like combat with the game. And that's where I think a lot of people piqued interest, myself included. I was like, wait, this game actually looks kind of cool. Like, the combat looks awesome. But everything they'd shown before that was this terrible dialogue and this poorly written character and story and quite on, voice acting and stuff. Like, it just wasn't good. And that's probably a huge contributing part to why the game didn't sell very well or underperformed, I guess, according to Square Enix. Like, they just didn't really do that game justice. But contradictory to having that huge, massive budget, like, where did that money go? Because now, again, I'm from the demo, it's an open world and all that, and you do some of these kind of checkbox like activities, but it wasn't like densely populated or anything. It wasn't, like Witcher level open world. So where does that money go? Like, how does it translate? And again, I'm not going to pretend to be a developer. I'm just, as a consumer, as a lifelong gamer, I'm just pointing out what I see. But when you take that budget compared to how it performed, something ain't right. Now, the next game is Callisto Protocol. So, as reported by DualShockers, the Callisto Protocol reportedly cost $160 million to develop and also underperformed. The article states that shareholders of the company estimated that they expected a cumulative sale of 5 million copies, but it doesn't even look like they've hit 2 million. And that article was posted, let me double check. This was January. So just a couple months ago. This one is crazy to me. So, like, on one hand, you've got a game that took, a 3-year dev cycle, which I like, a shorter dev cycle. They put together like a linear story-driven game, takes about 10 to 12 hours, so it's not terribly long. And it cost $160 million. Where did that money go? That's insane. Like, an open world game like Forspoken cost $100 million, and then this game is $160 million. Now, I thought it was great. Good, like a good looking game is what I mean. I enjoyed my time with it. I think it's a good first step for that game, but $160 million, I don't see it. Like, that's insane. That's such a huge budget. Like, no wonder. Just for some perspective, a game Control, if you guys have heard of that game, that's the Remedy game, came out in August of 2019. That game cost around $25 million to make. And that game is arguably better in a lot of ways. It's kind of a Metroidvania style game. It's got fun combat with like telekinesis powers, great environmental storytelling, and a actual mind-bending narrative that I, to this day, still don't even understand. $25 million. And then Callisto Protocol is $160 million. Like, no wonder you're not getting your money back, because it's a new IP coming right before Dead Space remake, and you spent that much money on the game. Like, that's not good. And it's unfortunate, because I would like to see a sequel to Callisto Protocol, because I think there's a lot of foundational things that are great about that game that just doesn't fit in with that budget, though. And so who knows if we'll ever get a sequel to that game, which is unfortunate. But I think if you like, on one hand, I want to support this game because I like the idea of, linear story-driven games, shorter games with shorter dev cycles. I think that's something we should support and strive for and do more of within the industry, just not with the $160 million budget. Now, a couple other examples to walk through that I found is The Last of Us Part 2. So, according to an article from Bloomberg in August of 2020, the cost of this game was around $100 million. And this is a big game. We all know that. A big hit for PlayStation, big hit for Sony. And this is one where, like, I can see where all the money went. It's a beautiful looking game. It's an amazing story. There's a lot of depth to it. It's high quality. Like, it's a very, very high quality experience. That makes sense. But then here's some others. GTA 5 was approximately $260 million, which is insane. But that game obviously has made their money back. That game is That's like the number one sold game ever, I think, behind Minecraft, if I'm not mistaken. Modern Warfare 2, and I think this is the 2009 one, but 250 million. Tomb Raider, the 2013 reboot, $100 million, which is crazy. The original Final Fantasy VII, which came out back in 1996, at the time was a huge gaming budget of $45 million. Again, with inflation, I think this is a little dated because inflation is much higher than that, but it estimated around $70 million. Either way, think about that time in 1996. That's a huge budget for a game back in 1996 and being developed even before that. That's crazy. Additionally, I found another article from Charlie Intel that from this past November that stated from some of the Activision Blizzard deals, some of the CMA docs that have come out, stated that Sony says Call of Duty warrants a budget of over $300 million and each game takes 3 to 5 years. Think about that for a second. $300 million in every game takes 3 to 5 years. Like, it's no wonder that Call of Duty has 5 to 7 different development teams in this machine, consistently pumping out a new game every year. That is just mind-blowing. Holy shit. And let me just say this. And y'all think Xbox is going to make that machine better or take people off that machine to go make a new Spyro game when they haven't even proven that they can do something noteworthy with their own development studios, their first party teams? Really? I digress. Now, obviously, those examples I just went through, they're all big AAA, kind of top of the outlier budgets on the high end. But I feel like this is kind of counter to some of the consumer trends I see within the industry and expectations. And before I get into my thoughts, I came across this other article that kind of want to reference, that I think it articulates this issue in relation to Starfield. So this was published back in May of 2022, when Starfield was previously delayed. And it's a lengthy article, so here's the too long, didn't read version of it. They state that games currently have like 5+ year dev cycles. Games are not getting smaller, they're getting bigger, and bigger. There's more bloat to them. Games are very impressive on a technical level, and there's a lot of time and effort spent to make games as technically advanced as possible. I mean, look, we just saw from GDC, Ninja Theory, the developers behind Hellblade, just put out an Unreal 5 they did an Unreal Engine 5 tech demo with Senua, I think is the character's name, her face, and it looks so realistic. Every movement is insane, and it's a very impressive demo, but it's a demo nonetheless. And it's kind of funny with that, because how long has Hellblade 2 been in development? And we're still talking about tech demos for this. Like, look, it's awesome. The technology is amazing, but like, are we going to get Hellblade 2 anytime soon? Or are you just going to keep doing demos? So there's that. But then the article also points out that they have massive and bloated budgets. And then it poses the question, do they need to be all of those things? Because they then point out, as they reference enjoying Tomb Raider games, I think it's Tomb Raiders 1, 2, and 3 from 96 through 1998, stating that games back in the day didn't have this as an issue. And a lot of those games are held in high regard, even to this day. And so this line, I think, kind of sums it up, I think, pretty nicely. So it says, quote, "Is it really that impressive that a game that costs $150 million and takes more than a decade to make on superior technology looks smoother than a game from 20 years ago if the older game is more fun or more inventive or has more to say?" And I think this is an interesting point. Now, I don't think that's to say that games can't be technical powerhouses or take take a while, or do some of these big bloated fancy things that a lot of AAA games strive for today. I don't think that's what it's saying here. But I think what it is saying is that maybe we need to think about what the game is trying to do rather than just pump a lot of money, technical power, and bloat the shit out of this game to try to hit some arbitrary milestone, whether it's hours played or what other metric you may have, and think about that. And I think that's interesting. Now, here's how I look at things when it comes to these two contradicting things that are happening. So first, what are those contradicting things that I see happening? First, from the consumer side, I think you have a constant rising of consumer expectations around what a AAA game should be. And that is kind of bigger, better, longer type of things. And with every major game, big hit that comes out, like let's say Elden Ring, for example, or recently God of War Ragnarok, which seems like a lot of people are kind of stealing those types of games and trying to mimic those, rightfully so to a certain degree, in future titles. But with each one of those, it's like the expectations just keep kind of continuously rising. You mix that with this kind of resistance from consumers around buying games. I mean, just look at all the flack and all the controversy that's been around with the $70 price tag around video games. Like, people, there's a lot of people who are just ain't having it. And look, I understand, the current economic environment that we're in. I get that. But again, it's a lot of money to make these things. So prices haven't risen. I'm not going to go into game cost, but there's a lot of resistance to the price of video games. And I think part of that is influenced by subscription services like Game Pass, to where you can pay a small fee and get access to a lot of these games. And I think that has had an effect on the way people view the price of games, and it has an effect of trying to push the price of games down. Contrary to on the dev side, where we're seeing rising costs to make a game, labor shortages, economic crisis, inflation, and then you also have longer dev cycles compared to what we used to have. And so these things are kind of the antithesis of one another. They don't. Something's got to give between the two, and I think, in my opinion, I think the solution a little bit has to come from both sides. And that is that I think from the consumer expectation, for us as gamers, I think we need to have proper expectations on games. Part of that is influenced by marketing that we consume and receive. I concede that, but I think we need to not expect every game to be this 100-hour bloated adventure. It doesn't need to be that. It's okay if a game is 10 hours. It's okay if a game is 30 hours. Like, there's a game out there for all kinds of different tastes, and that's okay. We don't need to try to fit everything into this one mold. So I think we need to reset our expectations on that just a little bit. On the dev side, what I think needs to happen is we need to break out of this AAA $70 mold. Because I think we need to be willing to experiment with smaller, cheaper experiences. Now, I think about, and I don't have the interview pulled up, but I know, I think it was right around or shortly after Sean Layden left PlayStation, he did an interview talking about this issue. And this was a couple years ago, how game development costs were rising. They're taking too long to make games, and that this kind of cycle, this dev cycle, is not sustainable long term for the industry. And he said it'd be much more preferable to have shorter dev cycles, making kind of smaller games, having smaller budgets. That's much more sustainable. And so I think I think we need to move to some form of that. Not everything needs to be smaller budgets, smaller titles, faster dev cycles, but I think we need to experiment with it. I think we need to have more diversity in that, if you will. I think about a game like Miles Morales on the PlayStation 5. That's it's kind of an interstitial title between Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2, but it's a full-fledged title on its own. And I want to say that if I remember correctly, that game's about like 12 hours or so. Obviously, you can spend a little more time in it. But it's really fun. It's high quality. It's a great time. And I thought the length was perfect for what that game was. And that game was $50, if I'm not mistaken. And that's different. It's unique. Why can't we have a smaller, high quality AAA game be $40? It takes 2 to 3 years to make. Why can't we have that? Why can't we experiment with more things like that and experiment with the prices of the game based on, a multitude of factors in terms of length, style, narrative, etc. All those factors play with the price. Drop a $30 to $40 title, drop a $50 title, drop a $70 title. Why can't we see more price variance with some of these games? Because it seems like the perception today is like anything less than $70 is not a AAA high quality experience, even though there are a lot of wonderful games, indie or not, that are less than $30. So I feel like we need to kind of move towards that, experiment a little. And then we as gamers should embrace that and support that. And I think then we can kind of start to break this mold and maybe reach a sustainable level within the industry to where we can have a healthy, economically viable, thriving industry for video games. So that's my rant on the rising cost of game development. It's pretty crazy when you start looking at all the various budgets and kind of seeing like what all goes into like the making of a video game, and even the breakdown between like actual development and then like marketing. Like marketing is like half the budget usually, it seems like. It's just wild. And so I thought this would be a nice topic to touch on, something to think about. Just put it out there in the ether. Think about it, digest it. Of course, let me know what you think. But I think it's important. I love this, and I love video games. It's a huge passion of mine. It's obviously a hobby of mine, and I want to see it thrive. So that's all I got. One of the shorter episodes we've had in a while, but it is just me this week. Exciting next week. I think it should be next week. I've got another guest who's going to be coming on the show. He's a Twitch streamer. He's a Halo Twitch streamer. So we're going to talk Halo. I want to get his perspective on the game and the future of Halo. Maybe dive into a little bit of Xbox as well. It should be fun. We've kind of followed each other for a while, but never had the opportunity to sit down and chat. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And you can look forward to that conversation here. I think that will be on the next episode of the podcast, if not the one after, depending on our schedules, if they line up. And then again, just looking for some more guests and I got a couple of topics in my back pocket. And of course, whatever happens in the news, we'll be bringing that up as long as it's exciting. Lots of games to be playing as well, man. It's a good time to be gaming, that's for sure. So thank you all for your love, kindness, and support of the show, whether it be on YouTube or podcast services. I see you. I appreciate you. And my only ask of you is to share with your friends. Get the word out there. Let people know if you like the show. It's always appreciated. I hope you guys have a great week. Play some video games. Get out, maybe touch some grass a little bit. That's always nice to do. And I will talk to you guys next week. So until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.